Driven by an unshakable belief that Brazil's jungles hid a city lost for millennia, a British colonel set off in 1925 to discover the origin of South American civilization and vanished into the trees as if the forest itself had swallowed his name. Mato Grosso in Portuguese means dense forest, a fitting name for a landlocked Brazilian state nearly 3 times the size of Texas. Until well into the modern era, indigenous nations were the only inhabitants of its nearly impenetrable rainforests, and few outsiders had even tried to chart its interior. Maps stopped being maps and became guesses. Rivers twisted like living things. The canopy turned daylight into green twilight. What wasn't hidden by leaves was hidden by distance, fever, and fear. Into this steaming wilderness, filled with animal species still unfamiliar to zoologists and native tribes whose existence outsiders didn't even suspect, 3 explorers dared to advance in April 1925. They would face venomous snakes, flesh-eating fish, clouds of biting insects, and an uncertain welcome from anyone they met, all in pursuit of an elusive lost city known to them only by a code name, Z. 5 weeks after leaving the capital, Quib, the party's leader wrote home to his wife in England from an ominously named place called Dead Horse Camp, so named because his mount had died there on a previous expedition. "We hope to get through this region in a few days. You need have no fear of any failure." It was the last message ever received from the jungle explorer. Penetrating the veil, Colonel Percy Harrison Fawcett had been obsessed with the mysteries of the Brazilian interior for nearly 2 decades. He was a soldier, a surveyor, and a man who treated the unknown not as a warning sign but as an invitation. Between 1906 and 1909, he had been commissioned to help survey boundaries in South America, a job that dragged him through rivers that were more rumor than geography. He returned again and again to what outsiders called the Green Hell, as if each journey only sharpened his hunger for the next. He had heard the old stories, the ones Europeans laughed at and then secretly hoped were true. Spanish conquerors had chased El Dorado and the land of warrior women, the Amazons, without finding either. Yet the stories refused to die. Then, in 1911, news crackled through the world. An American explorer, Hiram Bingham, had revealed the lost Inca city of Machu Picchu, tucked high in Peru's Andes. A civilization could vanish and still leave stone footprints on the earth. A city could be real even if it sounded like myth. If the Andes had a hidden city, why not the Amazon? Why not Mato Grosso? On later travels, Fawcett collected tales the way other men collected trophies. In Chile, he heard of a still inhabited city of the Caesars, its streets paved in silver, its buildings roofed in gold. Its people supposedly lived under an enlightened king, protected by a magic that made their city invisible to the greedy and unworthy. In Rio de Janeiro, he discovered an old report describing the long-forgotten discovery, back in 1753, of the ruins of a monumental stone city. Then silence. No confirmed return. No follow-up expedition. Just a document like a torn corner of a larger truth. And then there were the stranger hints, the ones that didn't belong to science but clung to the edges of belief. Someone gave Fawcett a 10-inch figure carved of black basalt. He took it to a psychometrist, someone who claimed to read an object's origins by holding it. The verdict was exactly what an obsessed man wants to hear: Atlantis. A relic carried by survivors to the Brazilian wilderness, where they built a great city that time forgot. He didn't know the city's name, so he called it Z. Convenient, clean. A single letter for a dream, too large for ordinary language. The existence of the old cities I do not for a moment doubt, Fawcett wrote in 1924 as he prepared for yet another expedition. Between the outer world and the secrets of ancient South America, a veil has descended. Whoever pierced that veil would advance human knowledge immeasurably. At 57, he knew time was tightening its grip. This wasn't a young man's romance anymore. This was a last chance. The expedition that was too small. Fawcett raised funds from scientific societies and sold the story of his exploration and expected discoveries in advance to the press. He was ready by early 1925, but he made a decision that still haunts the story. He would go light. No caravan of dozens, no armed column that would look like an invasion, no crowd to slow him down. Just 3 men: Percy Fawcett, experienced, disciplined, relentless; Jack, his 21-year-old son, eager to prove he wasn't merely following a legend but becoming one; Raleigh Rimmel, a young friend, loyal, adventurous, and too young to understand what the jungle can do to human certainty. They planned to be gone until the end of the following year, and if they didn't emerge, Fawcett left a chilling instruction: no rescue parties. If he, with all his experience, couldn't survive, there was little hope for others. For that same reason, he refused to give a precise route. The jungle, after all, had ears. The wrong men could follow, and the city, if it existed, might require secrecy until it could be protected. In those days, communication was fragile. A letter could become a lifeline. A missing letter could become a funeral bell. From Cube, they pushed outward into a world that seemed designed to erase footsteps. The heat was not the heat of sunlight, it was the heat of breath, wet and constant. The insects did not merely bite, they claimed you, turning your skin into a map of welts. Every river crossing felt like a wager. Every unfamiliar sound in the dark felt like a test. Can you stay calm when your imagination wants to scream? Fawcett had stared into danger before. He knew how to march when afraid, how to ration when hungry, how to keep his mind sharp when everything around him tried to make it blur. But even he couldn't control the one enemy that always arrives quietly: time. Supplies shortened, boots softened, clothes rotted from sweat and rain. Small injuries became serious simply because the jungle never allowed anything to truly dry, truly rest, truly heal. And somewhere behind them, after each bend of river and each day of green silence, the civilized world fell farther away. Dead Horse Camp. When the party reached the place called Dead Horse Camp, it carried the shadow of an earlier loss. Naming places in the jungle isn't like naming places on a road. You don't name them because they're pretty. You name them because something happened there, something that left a mark. Fawcett wrote his wife, trying to make danger sound manageable. A husband's last kindness is often reassurance. He spoke with the certainty of a man who had convinced himself he could not fail, not because he was arrogant, but because doubt would be fatal. Then the letters stopped, and the jungle did what the jungle does. It kept its mouth shut. Tantalizing clues. In the years that followed, fragments drifted out of South America like messages in bottles. In 1927, Fawcett's younger son, Brian, met a French traveler in Lima. The man told him a story that felt both impossible and heartbreakingly plausible. Along a road in Minas Gerais, far from the expedition's last known position, he had encountered an old, sick, confused man who claimed his name was Fawcett. The traveler hadn't insisted the stranger come with him. He hadn't understood what he'd found. Brian tried to raise money for a rescue. He couldn't. And in 1928, the North American Newspaper Alliance sent a party under George Dyett to investigate. Dyett heard more stories. A native chieftain told him he had seen an older white man with two younger men, both lame, headed east, toward the Atlantic. For 5 days, smoke from their campfires could be seen. Then nothing. No footprints. No bodies. No trail. Just an ending so abrupt it felt like a knife cut. Dyett returned believing the three had been killed by indigenous people, but the Fawcett family refused to accept it. It was too simple, too neat. The jungle doesn't do neat. 4 years later, a Swiss trapper named Stefan Radin emerged from Mato Grosso claiming Colonel Fawcett was alive, held prisoner by a tribe. Another story surfaced, a half-white native boy who claimed to be Jack's son. Bones were produced and identified and later doubted. Each clue glittered briefly, then went cold. The facts never formed a clean line. They formed a fog. The city that became a spell. Over time, something strange happened. The expedition turned into a magnet. Searchers went in. Some never came out. Others returned thinner, quieter, haunted, as if the jungle had whispered something into their ears that they could not translate into ordinary speech. And whether it existed or not became more than a city. It became a spell people cast on the map, a promise, a dare. Fawcett himself had once said something that sounds less like an explorer and more like a man trying to justify the price of obsession. Whether we get through and emerge again or leave our bones to rot in there, one thing's certain: the answer to the enigma of ancient South America and perhaps of the prehistoric world may be found when those old cities are located and opened up to scientific research. That the cities exist, I know. It's easy to hear that now and think of stubborn pride, but it may have been something more human and more dangerous: faith. The kind that makes you step forward when the sensible choice is to step back. So what happened to Percy Fawcett, Jack, and Raleigh? Maybe they were killed. Maybe they were captured. Maybe illness took them quietly. Maybe they got lost and kept walking until walking became the only thing left. Maybe the forest did what it always does. It turned men into stories. As for the city remained where it had always been, just beyond certainty, just behind the veil. A single letter on the tongue of history, refusing to become a full word. And somewhere in Mato Grosso, under the endless green ceiling, the jungle continues to breathe ancient, indifferent, and patient, guarding its secrets like a living temple. Because the most terrifying thing about the green hell isn't that it kills you, it's that it can erase you, and still leave the world wondering if you were ever there at all.